Now we are heading to the capital for another update on the London property market, and I am joined by Property Tribe's partner for London property, and that is Marc von Grundherr, who is a director at Benham and Reeves, and they have a big footprint across London. So Marc is the most perfect commentator to discuss what's going on in the market in London. And Marc, interesting times, I'm sure you'll agree. When we last spoke, I think the kind of weather analogy was Scorchio. Now it's absolutely freezing outside, but what's the weather analogy for how you're finding the London market in early 2023?
The reality is the rental market is still very hot. I mean, we had the hottest, using that analogy, we had the hottest year last year we have ever seen. Prices were up, demand was off the rocket, and we've come into this year with very little stock, very few people moving out, and still quite a lot of people looking. So the market is still, the rental market is still, hot. I would say still hot. I'm still seeing, renewals that are coming up. Landlords are getting decent increases. The tenants that are in properties don't want to move out because they've looked and there's not a lot out there. It's eased a little bit. It's not as frantic as it was when we don't have the school movement going on. We're not in a term move. It's not like the end of the year. So houses market quietened down a bit, but then there's not that much available anyway. So, it's not like we have excess supply. We certainly don't have excess supply in any area, really. And that's the same across all markets, right from the east to the whole market's really busy. So rentals, it's good for landlords. Good for landlords.
Indeed. Now, some people might say, well, actually, I haven't got any property in London, so this call isn't really relevant to me. But I would actually disagree with that, because I think, and I don't know whether you concur, Marc, London is kind of like a barometer of what could happen in the rest of the country. Yes, we both agree it's got a very specific individual market, but, it does seem to be a good market to monitor to see what might happen elsewhere.
100%. I think London is its own, country on its own within the UK, because it has different dynamics driving it. There are lots of factors that affect it, but equally help it grow and do things the rest of the country hasn't done. So I think it's really interesting when people say, well, I own in, Newcastle or Manchester, and London doesn't really affect me. And to a certain extent, they have their own markets. But the thing is, if you look at what's happened to sales prices over the last year, everyone's saying last year was a fantastic year. In fact, since COVID, it's been fantastic for the property market. It has been, if you've not been in London. If you've been in London, it has not been a fantastic property market. The sales market has been totally flat. And actually, it was flat for 3-4 years before that. And the country market and cities and towns outside did very well. But now, of course, we're seeing, I'm sure we're going to chat a bit where we think the market's going to go. But I think what happens in London generally rolls over to the rest of the country. I think COVID was the first time ever where the opposite happened. And actually what happened in London, where people weren't coming to the offices, so they all moved out, that market all went into the outside London market. And I think now London suffered as a result of that. But now I think you're seeing a return. And I think, I think I think now is a good time to be in the London market. It hasn't been, but I think now is. So it is interesting. It is interesting. Everyone has a different view, but
well, we're definitely seeing the return to work, and that's going to obviously impact both sales and rentals. And that there's good things happening in the London market, but the mainstream media doesn't really seem to talk them up very much. I mean, one thing that you and I like to look at is the number of tech firms that are, coming into London, because they bring investment, they create jobs. And London was recently named the top city for tech. Globally, yes, exactly. And this is something to really shout about, because we get these clusters of tech businesses forming in the city, and they're great employment for young professionals who make great tenants. So, you know, there's always things to look at in the London market where it's definitely kind of bucking the trend, and where the mainstream media isn't really, you know, paying close attention to what's going on. And that's a good way to see opportunity, I think.
I totally agree. I think tech is the big story. Let's be honest, we're an old nation, you know, an old country. People always think, you know, you look at what happens in Europe, countries get left behind and the new modern economies grow. You look at Asia, you look in Africa, you look, you know, China, India, these growing economies. And usually the older countries, you know, we get bigger and bigger debt because we're not producing. And it's fantastic. Obviously, London has financial services, the UK a little bit, but mainly London has financial services. And that was our kind of thing for the last 20 years. To now see tech outside, you know, Silicon Valley is not as big as we are now. And you think that everybody thinks tech's in you know, in the US, but actually now to think that London is the global center for technology, I think that's unbelievable from a British thing. To have it here, I think it's amazing. We should be very proud of ourselves. It's a good source of people looking to rent in London. I mean, you look at the Google, you know, Amazon, Facebook, or Meta as they are now, and you look at their campuses in London, and that's the word now, you know, these massive buildings they have with thousands of people. Apple's headquarters coming into Battersea Power Station. I mean, I think tech is a really big story. It's so funny you said it, because I've been saying it in my talks the last couple of years that I do in Asia, and talking about the number of people in tech. I mean, students is the other big, you know, volume thing, 400,000 overseas students in the UK. I think that's another big story. But I think tech is interesting because it's for the long term as well, which I just think it's great for us.
Well, I think also with all this uncertainty with rising interest rates and the economy, you know, many first-time buyers are delaying getting on the property ladder. Some can't afford to anymore, and those people are going to rent longer. So again, that's true actually across the entire country, not just London. But, you know, as landlords, I think we have to try and seek out the positives in our sector, because there are so many negatives. And you know, speaking anecdotally as a London landlord, I've got long-standing tenants, and they have I've recently done rent reviews for all of them, because I've not raised the rents for many years. And they were all aware of you know, how competitive it was in London to get a property, and they were all happy to you know, increase the rent a little bit. I did not put it up to market value, but I, you know, came to a compromise that worked for them, because obviously, you know, in the cost of living crisis, we want to keep good tenants, we want to sustain 100%. Tenancies. So you know, as far as I'm concerned, I've had no voids, no arrears. I'm touching wood as I say this. And you know, across your lettings portfolio at Benham and Reeves, you'll be aware of you know, how many tenants are in arrears, how many voids you've got, and I would imagine they're on the low side.
The amount of tenants that are late by more than 5 days is incredibly low, and the number that we go to court, so we manage 3,500 properties, we probably end up going to court 10 times, if that, a year. And that seems like a lot, and a lot of people are going, oh my God, you have to go to court 10 times. That's 1 out of 350. That is not a lot. But the reason I say, you know, every day a tenant's late annoys landlords, and it annoys me, and I'm a landlord myself, and I hate tenants being late. But a lot of the time, and we've found that, is when you analyze the tenants that are late, often we find out why they are, and often it's because their rent is due on the 25th and payday's the 31st or the 30th or 29th or 28th, whenever the last day of the month is. So actually we look at that and we try to help them by therefore pushing the rent due date to the 1st. And if you do that, you find everybody pays on time. You know, in a massive inflationary period, And what we should bear in mind with that, that's good for landlords, because if you've got a mortgage, inflation, all that does is run your mortgage down. And if your interest rate, I know it's gone up, and I'm sure we'll talk about that, it's gone up to now 4 or 5% interest. But if inflation this year ran at 14%, that's the value of your loan has devalued effectively. So that's a good thing. It's not the same if you've got it in cash, but it erodes away the debt. And that you do want a little bit of inflation, but with my landlord hat on for tenants, I think you have to, it's all about being reasonable. Like you said, Vanessa, I'm the same. I've got a tenant who's been in one of my properties for 5 years. And yes, I could get more money, and I do put it up. Don't be so. I'm obviously not here as a charity. Landlords that want to get the optimum value, that's great. But there's a give and take with it. If a tenant comes in, pay the most, and then moves out and in and out and in and out, there's costs, soft costs involved with that. So I think
definitely. What about on the sales side? I just was curious. Have you got landlords coming to you with tenanted properties that they're looking to sell?
You talked about the negatives earlier. The negatives are that with interest rates going up and mortgage interest rate relief and all of the things that we've been hit by as landlords, it's not as great as it was. But I think that's more for people entering as opposed to the people that are already in it. If you're already a landlord, why would you exit? You've got an appreciating asset that you've already paid all the costs on to get into it. You're going to have a capital gain you're going to have to pay tax on. So why would you crystallize it unless you've got a .com that you're going to put the money into that's going to be amazing? And number two, you've got pretty sure ongoing income from the tenant. A long way around to answering your question. Do we have some landlords selling? Of course we do. We've got, at any one time, we've always got landlords that want to exit, and they exit for a variety of reasons. But, it's different. If you want to sell because you need the money for something, or you're just, you've owned it for 30 years and you don't want to pass it to your children, or whatever you want to do, those people are exiting. But we have not seen people running for the hills exiting like I've read. There's not enough stock. And the thing is, if it does happen and lots of those landlords do exit, all it means is there's less property for rental. So that will help solidify those people that remain in it and remain investors. And that's the fundamental part of the property market in the UK. Shortage of supply, lots of people looking to rent, like we talked about tech and people. We deal with developers every day. And a lot, some smaller ones that we're speaking to, and some of the larger ones too, are delaying phases because they've got sales prices have been under pressure. They've got Help to Buy's ended. Well, it's ending, but it's ended for all intents and purposes. And build costs are through the roof. So you've got three things that are seriously affecting the market. And if you own some land, why would you build it if prices are not up? So they're just going to mothball it, and they're going to wait for prices to start moving again, or maybe costs to come down. It's just interesting. The reduction in house building, I think, is another crucial factor that's going to be, it's going to haunt us for years. This.
You mentioned it was good for landlords it's going to be okay for landlords that stay in that are already in the market and have been for a while, and stay in it, and keep informed and are smart about what they do. But just really, as we come to the end now, Mark, if there's a newbie watching this thinking, well, I want to get involved in the London property market, what type of property and are there specific areas that you think there is a good opportunity for newcomer landlords? And I just want to say to the PT community that Mark is very happy for you to contact him direct. If you want to discuss anything or you want his opinion on the London market, he's very available and approachable. And we appreciate that about you, Mark, because you're a great resource for the community. But, newbie landlord, they rang you up and they said, I want to get into the London market. What would your advice be?
Okay, so first thing is, when people say, is this the best time to buy or is this the worst time to buy? If I really knew that, I wouldn't be doing this. I'd have made zillions of pounds. I cannot tell you this is the bottom of the market or this is the top of the market. I don't know. And nobody knows. Really, it's only when it happens and you're lucky to be there. So the first thing is you can't always buy the cheapest and you can't sell at the top, because it's so difficult to do that. So the best time to invest is when you're ready. And so for a new person coming along and say, look, I really want to do this. I think I want to invest in property. I've got some money. I want to do it. So I always say to them, when you say you've got some money, are you really ready to do it now? Because when you're ready to do it is the time to really focus on doing it. And by being ready, I mean, do you have enough money for a deposit? So are you sure you want to borrow 70%? So have you got 30% cash plus the stamp duty plus the other? You want to look at somewhere that you're going to get an okay income from it. And the okay income, I think you need to be looking in London is anywhere from a 4 to a 5.5% yield.
Well, you're probably talking about a 1 or 2 bed flat.
1 or 2 bed, and I was going to say, so that ends up, you end up in the 1 or 2 bed. You should look at areas slightly further out, and then we look to zone 2 or maybe zone 3 or zone 4 or zone 5. I think period is equally good as new builds. A lot of our overseas investors, they only want new builds. And I think that's a mistake. They won't look at secondhand, because actually I think you can do equally well with a period property. As long as it's in good condition and you maintain it, it's no harder. But, but you have to be willing to, buy secondhand.
Yeah. Well, maybe a new build apartment that's maybe 5 years old.
Yeah.
It's still got its NHBC guarantee.
100%.
Still be relatively low to in terms of maintenance costs. It won't need an uplift for a few years. And very often, new build is sold at a premium. So my advice really is to wait, or rather to look where there's new build and then look for somewhere that's maybe 4 or 5 years old.
100%.
I don't know what you think about access to transport, but my kind of benchmark has always been within a 10-minute walk of a major transport link or bus route. And I also have my pint of milk rule, which wherever I'm buying, it has to be within a 5 or 10-minute walk to get a pint of milk. I think these are all kind of important things for city dwellers that they kind of really demand a standard.
Close to transport goes without saying. If you're buying something a 15-minute walk from the tube, from transport, you're going to really struggle. What I was going to say that was interesting. So the flat that I just agreed near Wembley is nothing to do with me, but someone offered me the flat. The guy had bought it off plan. He paid 400,000 for it. He's paid £100,000 deposit. He can't afford to complete. And the person that sold it to him told him he was going to double his money. As ever, I felt sorry for him. But anyway, the point is, I don't know the seller. It came through somebody else, but I've just bought it for 335,000. He paid on land registry. It will go through at 390, and I picked up for 335. He still gets 35. He's paid 100,000, so he paid 390. He's paid £100,000 deposit. I'm paying 335. He will get 35,000 back. But if he hadn't, he'd lose the 35 as well. So it sounds like I'm taking advantage, which I'm really not, but I only offered him what I told he would take, and he's accepted it. And actually that's a good deal. And there are deals like that about. In fact, someone in my office just offered me a 2-bedroom in the same development and said, did I want? And I think I've got one. I don't want to buy a second one. But there are these there can be distressed sales out there, but you have to be ready to go. We've got something at the moment that they paid 550 for, and I think he'll take 500, which I think is not a bad discount. I've got a couple in 9 Elms that people are struggling on, but they're, you tend to find the ones where they struggle are the higher value units. So sometimes, it's not for everybody, but there are definitely I like distressed as well. I think distressed can be good, but just be careful that it really is distressed and it's not. It wasn't very overpriced at the beginning. That's the
Well,
only thing
that's
to
where
watch out
expert kind of and local knowledge
Yeah.
comes in. Well, that's brilliant, Mark. Thank you so much for this update. It's always such a pleasure speaking to you and hearing the lowdown on the London property market. And you know, I'm going to keep the faith. I've got no voids, as I mentioned, no rental arrears or anything like that. Fairly stable, and I'm just going to sit tight and see how things develop over 2023. But thank you very much for joining us as always. And if anybody's got any questions for Mark or wants to contact him directly, you will find his details underneath this video. But for now, thanks, Mark, and let's reconvene in the summer and see if we can still talk about
positive market. Thank you.
Thank you.